Hello there everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing about a level that changed Geometry Dash forever. Bloodbath is a level that was released in the 1.9 update and was almost definitely the catalyst for the 2.0 update. It was absolutely miles ahead of its time, and that was for a multitude of reasons. Of course, the main reason was its sheer difficulty in comparison to everything else at the time. Back then, extreme demons were far from common. There weren't many people that had the skill and or dedication to do something on this level. The levels before this were of course levels like Ice Cavern Diablo X, the Ultimate Phase, and the old version of Cataclysm. They were all considered borderline impossible for the time. They had their victors, but they were very far and few between. Of course, all of these levels have something in common, and that none of them were verified legitimately. All three of them were either verified with some form of speed hack or some form of verify hack, which wasn't as frowned upon for the time as it wasn't as common. Each level got its own backlash, as every level does. However, they were still really appreciated and surprisingly loved. During this time, a player who you may know as Riot started to make a name for himself, as one of the best players of course. He had already beaten old Cataclysm and since became the first victor of Ice Cavern Diablo X. This was an absolutely ridiculous achievement for the time, as they saw Cataclysm as we see levels like Slaughterhouse and Acheron today. But Riot wasn't done yet. He wanted to do something much more. On the 2nd of June 2015, we got a first ever look at Bloodbath. Nowadays, this might just look like your average ship part in some random 1.9 GDPS easy extreme, but to the community back then, this was much more than that. The reason this was possible is Riot was on 144Hz, which no one really knew back then how big of an advantage this was. Nowadays, literally everyone has either a really good monitor or uses bypass, and bypass wasn't really available back then, so you were kinda just stuck. But I digress. 6 days later, we got the second preview of Bloodbath. This preview was of Havoc, Gyron, and a bit of G-Boy, and honestly, it looks so much different than we know it today. It's probably for the best as well, as the structuring looks so much worse in this preview. For the next few weeks, the level was being built, so we never saw much progress other than the creators uploading their parts. On the 26th of June 2015, Riot got 48%, starting the verification process. He then got 58% on the 13th of July, 65% on August 3rd, and then 90% on August 6th. He was getting closer and closer to finally verifying Bloodbath, which at first seemed impossible, but was soon to become reality. On August 8th, he reached the final part, and unfortunately he died at 94%. This would be his final best, before he finally verified it 4 days later.
Oh my god!
It was finally done. After 25,000 attempts and months of patience, he had finally completed by far the hardest level in the game. This was instantly rated and placed at number 1 on the demons list. Now I've explained the history behind Bloodbath, let's get on to part 2 of this video. How did this change Geometry Dash forever? What specifically could never happen again, and what really pushed the boundaries so much? Point 1. It was verified live. No level at the time had a public verification process. It was usually just done off stream and then uploaded to YouTube. However, this was verified live on Twitch, and as you know, hard levels usually pull a lot of viewers if you're a decently big streamer. And on top of all of this, unlike Cataclysm, there was no way to play it. This was the only way to see it. Levels didn't get leaked back then either, so this was only adding more on top of everything else. Point 2. This was far above the current demons that we've mentioned, like Ice Cavern, Diablo X, and Cataclysm. The reason Bloodbath seemed so inhuman at the time is, as I mentioned earlier, no one really knew that 144Hz impacted ship and wave so much. Not only all of this, but Bloodbath was almost 2 minutes in length. All of the biggest levels like 9 Circles, Windy Landscape, etc, were all below this by a substantial margin, so length added on to this was a massive factor. Point 3. The verifier himself. As you know, Riot was the verifier. He was beating demons at an insane pace for the time. Many people struggled to just beat a few demons, let alone some of the harder ones at a blistering pace. Before Bloodbath, he had beaten some of the hardest demons at the time, and even more, he was beating everything. So as you can tell, he was definitely capable of beating the level in the first place. Point 4. It didn't just come instantly. There was a lot of build up, but not too much to where people stopped caring. At this time, it was almost unheard of to spend this much time on a GD level, especially with him doing it so publicly. People got to see the journey in its entirety, the fire attempts, the struggles, everything over a multiple week period. Point 5. It had a massive creating team behind it. It had some of the biggest names of the time, with players like Michigan, Etzer, Goran David and more. They even had G-Boy in on this, who as we know created Cataclysm, which was a fine addition to the team for sure. And ultimately, probably the most important one of them all, it was the first time this had ever really happened. It's the first time a new hardest level had been verified legitimately, live on stream as well. Also the first time a top player had actually verified it and not just some random. All of these factors combined created the biggest and most recognizable extreme demon in the game's history. Without any surprise, it's also the most liked and downloaded extreme in the game. Now let's get on to part 3 of this video. What levels have been inspired by Bloodbath since its release, and why hasn't something bigger happened since? The obvious first answer is of course every single hardest demon since Bloodbath, as they've all wanted to push the boundaries of difficulty for their time. I'm going to list off every single top 1 extreme demon since Bloodbath, and then give a brief description as to why I don't think they did as well or they failed in this instance. First off is Phobos, and no one really knew it was harder until later down the line. Succube and Hell was more so just the level and Truster just weren't big enough at the time to even come close. Thanatos was hack verified, so who really cared? Artificial Ascent wasn't streamed, so it didn't gather enough attention. Sonic Wave was definitely the best contender thus far, but the verification took too long. Yatagarasu had 3 verifiers and was also nerfed a little bit. Erebus kinda came out of nowhere and was just wildly overrated anyway. Digital Descent suffered the same things as Erebus and Artificial Ascent, where it was beaten off stream and it was wildly overrated for its time anyway. Oh yeah, Stalemate Redux was top 1. Plasma Pulse Finale just wasn't top 1 for long enough. Bloodless definitely had the biggest chance. However, Nobleboy took an extended break from the level, so the hype died down. Zodiac wasn't streamed because it was hacked. Crimson Planet didn't get verified by a big enough player, and it also wasn't rated until a year later. Tartarus was probably very close, but it just wasn't verified by a known enough player. As for the Golden, I'm not really sure. Probably just the level wasn't hard enough. Firework just simply took too long. Slaughterhouse definitely had a chance, but it was weirdly verified too quickly. Succuban Circles and Abyss of Darkness just weren't universally agreed to be harder than Slaughterhouse. Ultimately, we have Acheron. It just had too many verifiers. So, what have we learned from this, and how could we get a modern day Bloodbath? First off, it needs to be very clearly harder than the number 1 demon on the list. The level cannot be dropped, needs to be unique and verified by the top player at the time. An obvious one as well, the level has to be popular, it can't just come out of nowhere. And finally, it has to be verified in a reasonable time frame, probably anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months with consistently streamed progress. Is it possible for a level that hard to go that smoothly? Honestly, who knows? With the rate that players are progressing, it's very likely. It's just waiting for the stars to align perfectly for a chance at this happening. Whatever the level may be, I'm really excited for it. Hopefully it doesn't keep us waiting too long though. Anyway, that's the end of the video. Peace out everybody, have an awesome day.